much, everybody, for joining us. I'm sitting here with the proprietor of the Hudson House, Nyack's premier restaurant, Matt Hudson. Thank you very much for joining us here today. We've been here in Nyack for the past 12 years, 13 years, and this restaurant's hospitality, Matt's hospitality, is one of the things that really inspires us, and seeing everybody coming here on a nightly basis, enjoying themselves, celebrating, and just having a good time. It just really made me want to talk to you about really the start of your restaurant career, but even maybe a little bit further back, taking you back maybe to your childhood. Was this something that you were always interested in? Was that
it didn't start like that, but it did start early on. I'm the 8th of 10 children, and my mom happened to be a really good cook and a really good baker. So I remember as a child sitting around a crowded dining room table with all my brothers and sisters, my mom and dad, and enjoying great food. It wasn't fancy, but it was really good food that my mom made every night, and she was also a baker. So, I always say that my mom instilled the love of food in all of her children, and that's how she showed her love to us, because she was so busy doing everything else with 10 children, all the cooking and cleaning, that she had no time for the one-on-one with us, especially the younger ones like I was. And but boy, we felt the love coming from the food, and we just grew up loving food.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, so I was never very good in school. I learned when I was in my early 20s what dyslexia was, and then it kind of dawned on me, okay, that's why I had such a problem early on in school. But I did manage to graduate high school. I don't know how. I think, socially promoted before social promotion was a thing. But yeah, so I went through high school. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was artistic. I used to love to draw. But I didn't feel like I had enough creative ability, artistic ability to make a living as an artist. So right out of high school, I actually moved out of my parents' house, and I went to Pearl River High School, not too far from here. And I used to visit Nyack when I was in high school, and that's when I really fell in love with Nyack. I just loved the town, the physical town, being right here on the Tappan Zee section of the Hudson River, a place where I was born. I was born right here in Nyack. So I just had a very close connection to Nyack. So I moved here when I was 18 years old and really didn't know what I wanted to do. And I ended up doing house painting. At first, out of high school, I was doing house painting, and that kind of led into carpentry. And I did house painting and carpentry for 7 years out of high school. And then actually I was far away in 1977. I was up in Fairbanks, Alaska, building houses with a small construction company. And I got a letter from my older brother, Eddie, and he mentioned that he started to tend bar at this new bar restaurant in Nyack called The Old Fashioned. And it's getting towards the end of the year, 1977, it's getting dark and cold, and I'm thinking, tending bar sounds like a lot more fun than banging nails in Fairbanks, Alaska. Yeah. So that was where the seed was planted, that I would come back to Nyack and try to find a bartending job.
It's really interesting that you mentioned The Old Fashioned, because my wife's family is really from this area. I came up from the city, but The Old Fashioned was a pretty happening place here in my Claire's uncle actually often spoke about it, and he's a restaurateur as well. Uh-huh. And it really seems like it had some history in town.
Oh man, that was the hot spot. Yeah. I mean, OD's was already here. That was here since the 60s, and that was a great bar. But when The Old Fashioned opened, it was something new and exciting, and they really made it a nice interior, very rustic, and just people would flock to it. And my brother tended bar there for years, and that bar was open till 4 o'clock in the morning every morning. It did a phenomenal business, and when I came back from Fairbanks, that's where I would go, one of the bars that I would hang out at. And then, eventually, I didn't find a job right away, but I decided to go to bartending school. Cool. So in April of '78, I went to the American Bartending School over in White Plains. Took the 40-hour course, the first course in my life that I aced.
When you love something, right?
It was one of those things that, I thought it would be fun to work behind the bar. And, at the time I met a restaurateur who had a very, very busy restaurant over in Irvington, New York, a little fish restaurant called Benny's that had been there 35 years before I started working there. So I ended up, after meeting the owner, getting a job at his restaurant.
Great.
And at first I was a part-time bartender, and after 8 months, the full-time bartender left, and I ended up taking the full-time position. Well, I ended up there for 12 years, and I really, cut my teeth in the restaurant business there. I learned what hospitality was about. The place I worked in, Benny's, was just, they had basically the same service staff 12 years after I started that they did when I did start. And I learned through osmosis what made them successful. And I always boil it down to 3 things. And those, I felt like if you could do that anywhere, you could be a success in the restaurant business. And those 3 things are good food, good service, and good value. And, it doesn't have to be fine dining. It can be a burger joint. But as long as it's consistently good and the service is great and the value is there, then people will appreciate that and continue to come back.
Look, I mean, obviously, Hudson House's food is outstanding, but we always do talk about, the hospitality and the feeling of and the service that's here, and the feeling of belonging to everybody. As kind of sitting back on the wall, I look at how you guys interact with everybody. It's not just the regulars, and the regulars do come in here, but that always struck me as something. I always say Matt should be teaching a lesson in hospitality to every restaurant, because it triggers something within the customer where I feel they become more open and amicable, and then everything seems to go smoothly after that, and they seem to just look. It becomes almost, like you said, having a meal at home or something like that, where you feel comfortable. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing to experience when somebody's doing it really right.
Yeah, thank you. And I see it in other restaurants too. It's not. I mean, I think we carry it to a degree that I'm very, very proud of. I've got a staff that I'm constantly in great appreciation of every one of them, from the dishwashers in the back all the way on up to the head chef in the back. We have a very good working relationship, and my service staff is just unbelievable. Both sides of the house, the front of the house, back of the house.
Yeah. Incredible
team. And my service staff, again, they are just, you've been here, and I can sit back and look at the dining room and, watch one of our servers at the table, and the next thing you know, there's a burst of laughter coming out. And it's just, there's nothing I love seeing more than our guests obviously enjoying themselves. So I worked at Benny's for 12 years, and within 6 months I was thinking, oh man, maybe I'll open a restaurant someday. But then, I would hear and I would see and I would understand that it's a really, really challenging business.
Yeah.
But what happened after about 10 years of being at Benny's, I could see the writing on the wall. The owners were losing interest. There were 2 brothers. The older one was going to retire, and he was the one who I felt was holding the place together.
Yeah.
And I really had a strong feeling that when he did retire, it was just going to go downhill.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't want to be on that ship
Yeah.
while it sunk. And I decided, long story short, I decided to enlist my wife at the time, Amy Lehman. I asked her to please open up this restaurant with me. I've got this dream I want to try to fulfill. I want to have my own restaurant because I loved working in a busy restaurant. And she was a dancer, a modern dancer, and a teacher, dance teacher. And she wanted to stay on that track.
Yeah.
But she, God bless her, agreed to come on with me. She said, "All right, I'll be with you. I'll do the restaurant with you for 1 year. I'll help you get your feet on the ground. We'll figure out how to pay the bills." And I said, "Great, let's do this." And we took a giant leap of faith. We had never owned a business before. So we just blindly opened. Long story short, we ended up finding this place. It's a whole long story, but anyway, we ended up buying the business from the former owner, Serge Raoul, who had Raoul's Village Hall restaurant here between 1980 and 1990. Before he opened up, he did a major renovation on the building, and he did a phenomenal business. I mean, a phenomenal job creating this bistro-style restaurant within the old Village Hall confines. And I always loved this building. I used to come here when it was his restaurant, and I just thought it was the most beautiful dining room, one of the most beautiful dining rooms I've ever been in. So here was this opportunity to open up and just figure it out, and we decided to.
And was there, you mentioned how much you love Nyack. Were you ever considering doing something on the other side of the river, or was it always going to be Nyack?
No, Peter, at the time, Amy and I had been married for a few years, and we had, maybe, 10 years at that point. We had 3 young children. Our oldest daughter was turning 7 the week we opened up, and our twins were turning 4 the same week. And I knew that if I owned a restaurant, I would be there a lot. So I didn't want it to be across the bridge. I wanted it to be in the town that I lived in, the town that I loved. I wanted it to be a hometown restaurant. So there was no consideration of opening up anywhere but here.
Great. So Hudson House opens up, and was it Gangbusters right from the start? Or?
Yeah, it was Gangbusters, but boy, I remember looking back at those times, I was scared for myself.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I was petrified. I mean, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. The only thing I knew was that I could be a good front of the house guy.
Yeah.
And I knew at that point I had already been baking as a hobby for about 10 years. So I knew, all right, I'll work in the kitchen because I know I can make desserts. I'll do that during the day, but I know my strength is out front. So I'll be front of the house guy at night. And I knew that I could make our guests feel comfortable when they walked in the door.
Yeah.
But it was very busy right from the start, and we had to figure it out on the run.
Yeah, I think sometimes when starting a business, that kind of naivete is probably a strength, right? Because if you really think about, the massive challenges in front of you, you might not even get started.
You wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
And I always, I wouldn't have. And I always say that, if you wait till you know it all, you'll never do it because you'll never know it all. And to this day, we learn. Every day we learn something. Every week, we have to, and you have to evolve in this business, in any business, but especially the food business over the last 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
If you didn't evolve, you wouldn't survive.
Right. And that's kind of, it speaks to the longevity of the restaurant. It's been, 31 years? Yeah. So, it's an amazing achievement, I think, especially in this business to keep that at such a high quality too. I think, some of the economic downturns, the ups and downs of the community and things like that. It speaks to, what were some of the challenges that you faced, over the 30 years, or anything that sticks out where you said, oh shoot, maybe this could really be bad.
Right. Well, one of the biggest challenges we've had over the years is the fact that I'm not a chef, right? And we've always had to rely on the creative talents of a chef to put out the savory food. And, God bless them, they work incredibly hard, but chefs can tend to be a little on the crazy side. No offense to any chefs out there, but, it's like an artist.
Yeah.
I think the more creative you are and talented you are as an artist, kind of part of it is you're basically kind of crazy anyway, and part of it, I think a lot of artists feel like because of their extraordinary talents, they're almost entitled to, and they're expected to be crazy.
Yeah.
Over the years, we've had a lot of chefs, and some were total nightmares and some were total sweethearts.
Yeah.
Fortunately, right now, we have a young man who's been working with us over 6 years, and he used to come in here as a 5-year-old and on up with his mom. They lived in Nyack, and he grew up in Nyack, and he worked his way up over 6 years to now be our head chef.
That's beautiful.
Cole Dowie, great guy, really, really hardworking, talented guy.
Great. And look, your baking has obviously improved because for those of you who don't know, Matt, handles all the pastry baking here, and it's top notch. World-class desserts. I mean, that's something that clearly is a passion of yours.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned earlier my love of desserts coming from my mom. But probably about 40 years ago, a couple of years after I started tending bar, one of my sisters, my sister Kay, was becoming a really good baker, and I loved her desserts, and I finally overcame my fear of learning how to bake and asked her for help. And I said, Kay, show me how to make pies. So Kay is responsible for actually teaching me the first, the ABCs of baking.
Okay.
And, I always looked up to my sister Kay. And she was not just a baker of desserts, but she had talent for baking breads. And, there was no recipe that intimidated my sister Kay. And she could master any recipe. And throughout the years, she was always my mentor, my baking mentor.
That's great.
Yeah.
So you have this restaurant, it's going strong throughout the years. Was there ever a thought of, hey, let's open up a second location, expand, or anything like that?
No, never a serious thought, because, I knew how difficult it was to develop a team. And I felt very, very lucky to have developed the team that I had. And I also, part of it, and I tell people this a lot, part of it was that if I opened up another restaurant, I would have to divide my time between this room and another room.
Yeah.
And any other room couldn't compare.
Yeah.
And plus now over the years, I've had my fingerprints on the walls, the ceilings. I painted the whole interior, these colors, chose the colors, painted the colors. Over the years, I've filled the walls with my own artwork, starting first with photographs of my children, portraits that are hanging in the back hallway. Then I had an opportunity to rent a cottage on the river, so I was taking Hudson River photographs that I ended up putting in the dining room walls. Big canvas prints and photographs that I took of the beautiful Tappan Zee.
We're gonna talk about that, by the way. We're gonna talk about Matt's art, because you can have a gallery as an artist. But okay, yes, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Basically, opening up, I had no clue that these years later that the walls would be filled with almost exclusively my own art. As a young man in my early 20s, I started carving as kind of a branching out from carpentry. So I started carving in my early 20s and stopped in my mid 20s when I started tending bar. But I always kept that set of chisels that I had from back then, hoping that someday I would have the time to get back to carving. And that someday happened 14 years ago. I started carving again in October of 2007, and once I started carving again, I never stopped. And so last month being the 14th anniversary of my starting to carve again, I was curious how many pieces that I did, and so I have them all on photographic file. And I went back over 14 years, and it turns out I've carved over 40 pieces.
Wow.
Of varying sizes and lengths of time to make.
Yeah.
From, smaller pieces could take 30 hours, 40 hours, 50 hours, and I had a piece here in the bar that I worked on for 7 months, and it took me 160 hours.
Wow.
The one behind me here, that was the most
My favorite piece, by the way.
I think it's my favorite also,
Yeah.
and it was the most challenging design that I've ever done so far. This one took about 70 hours.
I will tell you, obviously follow the Hudson House on Instagram, but also try to follow Matt. When I saw he has these phenomenal process videos of how all these things come to life. And when I first saw them, I'm like, holy shit, this is intense, and I mean, an incredible amount of effort and talent that goes into these things. So I mean, it was one of the most impressive things that I've seen. That so not only a great restaurateur, but also an amazing artist. So really cool to see, and everybody should check out Instagram for those things because they're outstanding.
Thank you very much.
You got it. So no new restaurants, and I get that. Really want to focus on the passion and the love of the Hudson House. And again, the business is humming. And then, of course, the last couple of years come around and we are hit with COVID, which obviously affected so many businesses. But I think the restaurant industry, I can't even imagine, if you could take us back, not even to the middle of it, but when it was kind of coming, did you feel like this was going to be just something that could derail the whole operation, or did you think that you could work through it? What was like that initial response?
Yeah, well, the initial response was one of shock.
Yeah,
just utter shock. We were within 6 months of celebrating our 30th anniversary, and humming right along. We were going great guns. Looked like everything was going to be fine, and then you started hearing in the news about this virus, and it wasn't the first virus that we heard of.
Yeah.
None of it really affected us here in the States, and we thought it was just another one of those things. And then we started hearing, they closed down France. Like, what?
Yeah.
How do you close down a country? So, and then the next thing you know, March 15th or so rolls around in 2020, and okay, you got to close. And like I said, it was just shock.
Yeah.
And, all of us were like, what the hell? What do we do?
Yeah.
How long is this going to be like this? And it was just, we completely closed for 2 months.
Yeah.
So that was a real shock to my system and everybody's system. I'm in a very, very fortunate position where, I was able to live my life without, fortunately I was collecting unemployment for the first time in my life.
Yeah.
And I was not worried about paying my bills. And I was able to I'm an avid rower, as you know. I row on the Hudson River. I've been rowing on the river for 17 years now. So all through the pandemic, I was able to access my boat, get out on the river. In fact, in 2020, I rowed more days than I had ever rowed before. I rowed 277 days last year.
I'm sure it was somewhat therapeutic.
With
everything
it was very therapeutic, as though it always was, and it still is to this day. I was on the river this morning, and it's not just physical exercise, but visually, stunning every day. I've yet to tire of this river, and so I was very lucky to be able to do that, and it gave me a lot of time to carve.
Yeah,
I figured, all right, I'm just going to carve a lot. In fact, this piece, I started in March of 2019, and after a bunch of hours where I cleared a lot of wood and had the rough shape of the face done, I was so intimidated by this design that I couldn't continue. I don't think I can do this.
Yeah.
So I put it down for a year, and then when we got locked down, when we had to close, that's when I put this piece back on the table and spent another 55 hours on it, getting it to where it is now.
Wow, that's amazing. So 2 months of closure, and when you reopened, was it purely a takeout
Yes.
business at that point?
Yep, which is something we did very little of.
Yeah.
You know, this is the kind of place where it's not just about the food.
Yeah.
It's about the service and the atmosphere. And you know, and those are two very, very strong suits of ours.
Yeah.
So basically, it was like opening up another business
Yeah.
because it was all food to go, and you know, we had to redesign the menu to make it better for travel.
Yeah.
So that, you know, it was very challenging. It's like I did it kicking and screaming because I want a food to go business, you know.
Yeah.
But we did it because we knew our frequent guests that would come in were hoping for that we would open up for at least for food to go, and they wanted us to continue to survive. So we decided, okay, we got to do this, and we did. And you know, very, very small crew. It was just me and Noemi, one of our servers up front, 3 guys in the kitchen. And you know, it was what we did for about a month after we opened up again.
Yeah.
And then after that, we were able to. The weather was getting nice again, so we were able to serve on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
So we were doing food to go and sidewalk dining. And about a month after that, we were able to do 50% inside. So little by little, you know, as things opened up, we were able to reestablish our business. And it's not back to 100% yet, just like everybody else. We're having issues finding as much help as we need to open up for the 8 shifts that we used to be open.
Yeah.
We used to be open 6 nights and 2 brunches. We're just open 5 nights now. People are on a daily basis. People are begging us to open for brunch again.
Yeah, I'll stop calling that, you know.
Yeah, you know, it was a great 2 shifts, and Jose, who has worked for us for over 25 years, he was the master of the brunch, master of ceremonies at brunch time. He held court out here. People just came not just for the food and the atmosphere, but to see Jose and the crew and you know, get his special brand of love.
Matt and his team worked through the challenges that the Delta and Omicron variants presented from a human resources perspective to health safety issues, and have continued to craft outstanding meals while providing world-class hospitality to Hudson House clientele. He plans to keep the restaurant in family hands. His daughter, who is currently working at a high-end New York City restaurant, is close to coming in and helping run the room. Until then, you can walk into Hudson House and be treated to an amazing meal, insanely delicious dessert, and a warm smile from Matt and his team. Thank you for joining us this week. We hope you enjoyed the show. Please show your love by subscribing to our channel, liking the videos, and commenting.